Hard Rock Empire is on the air. We are back with another week of podcasting excellence on the Hard Rock Empire. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. It is the music of May 29th on the agenda. As we mentioned a few weeks ago, this was the fifth of a 5-week release month, and I think we have found that maybe there were not enough great releases to have 5 weeks worth of releases in the month of May, but we were still able to find some good ones to spotlight on the podcast, and we'll talk about that today. And of course, we'll also get into the vault where Mike and I will have a couple classic albums you need to check out. So glad to have you along with us once again on the Hard Rock Empire, live on Twitch and on YouTube. Joining me in studio, as always, is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
It's going. Weird week in music. I think there were a few things out there that weren't really up my alley, but people might enjoy. What I did listen to, I liked a good deal of it. It was really hard to pinpoint that one or two that really stood out to me. But yeah, it's been a week. We got announcement about what could be the farewell concert for Ed Guy next year. Kind of bummed about that, but we'll see if maybe a tour comes out of that leading up to it. Who knows?
Yeah, that's certainly going to be interesting because it kind of came out of nowhere and it's a long way out into the future. So I think that both of those things kind of raised some eyebrows. There weren't really a lot of details other than a date and a location. So nobody's really sure if it's just going to be one final send-off show, if it's going to be a series of shows, if it's going to start a farewell tour. I think nobody really knows at this point, and my guess is we're not going to know for a little while since the date is so far out in the future. But it kind of comes on the heels of what maybe hardcore Avantasia fans were not crazy about, and that's the fact that the newest Avantasia album really felt a lot more like an Ed Guy album than an Avantasia album. It was obviously really good, but for those people who kind of want the over-the-top nature of Avantasia, it didn't feel like that as much as maybe an Ed Guy album that was a little more over-the-top than a typical Ed Guy album.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Avantasia as well as Ed Guy, and when that first track dropped from the newest Avantasia, what was that one? Freak Show or something like that? Creep Show?
Something
Creep Show.
Yeah.
I just remember thinking, like, this feels like something that would have been off of, like, Superheroes EP or Rocket Ride or Space Police. It didn't feel like this is some sort of rock opera kind of thing. It kind of caught me off guard, and I was kind of curious. Wanted to check out some reviews. Angry Metal Guy gave the newest Avantasia 2.5 out of 5. Let's see. Here Be Dragons is my least favorite Avantasia album thus far, but it isn't awful, and it wasn't painful to replay a bunch of times. Your mileage may vary. Here's to better days and smoother sailing for this pirate beshirted yacht club. Yeah, it wasn't a bad album. It's just not what I'm expecting to hear when I throw on an Ed Guy record.
Yeah, I think that was
or
kind of
Avantasia, I should say.
I think that was the general consensus, and probably depending on how much you like what Ed Guy does, probably it was completely in line with how much you like this album, because if you really wanted what Avantasia typically brings, this really wasn't it. But as far as being a quality album, it was. So kind of a difficult situation, and one I'm surprised we don't run into more often. We talk all the time, especially when we get into like Frontiers bands, about musicians that are in multiple bands and like how do you distinguish one Ronnie Romero band from another Ronnie Romero band. You know, we've talked a lot about Halloween and obviously them bringing the super group together, and like how do you kind of work the different, not only the different eras of Halloween into an album, but also kind of what they did outside of Halloween. So it's like it's a complicated picture to kind of put all that together and make everybody, not only everybody as far as making your fans happy, but making everybody in the band happy as well.
And it's tough because obviously any kind of music project is going to go through evolution and changes over the years. I mean, Ed Guy themselves, if you listen to Space Police, Defender of the Crown, it sounds nothing like Vainglory Opera. Like They were much more a power metal band. They kind of drifted more into like a pop metal hard rock thing there toward the end, which I enjoyed both sounds, but I think this is a similar thing where it's they did X amount of albums in a particular style. it's not always going to be that way.
Yeah, I think, and that's always hard for fans to deal with. And as we've talked about before, bands really have two options. You can just keep churning out more albums that sound like what your albums sound like. I think, generally Megadeth has followed that formula pretty well. Even the new stuff that might have different members, there's kind of a lane that they stay in, and you are always kind of pleased because of it, because it's going to be Megadeth. On the same token, we talked about Alice Cooper a few weeks ago, that how he was able to basically change his sound moving through the years, and one of the few who did it successfully, that found a way to whatever was kind of current, he was going to meld his sound into a little bit of that. So a lot of different ways to go, and in the end, every musician's got to figure out what they want their sound to be, and who are they trying to please? Do they want to just make the music they want to make, or are they trying to make the fans happy? And that's oftentimes going to determine how far off the beaten path they end up going when they make their new albums.
Yeah, and this is kind of off on a tangent from the Avantasia Ed guy topic, but I think sometimes it feels like the industry plays winners and losers, like why Alice Cooper was allowed to reinvent himself and Ozzy Osbourne, and then so many of the bands that I'm kind of getting into with one of my vault topics, it's like they weren't given that same opportunity to adapt in a way that they would still be getting that industry support and promotion. It's really strange to me.
Yeah, it does. It completely varies. And to Alice Cooper's defense, he's one of those guys that has always been probably a really good ambassador for music, a guy you always would see doing the press conferences, he was playing in the Pro-Am golf tournaments. Clearly a guy who understood what it took to kind of play, hey, I'm going to be the metal guy, but I'm also going to tee it up at the Celebrity Pro-Am event in Pebble Beach and kind of glad hand and do those sorts of things that probably endeared him to the industry execs. And there were probably some bands who maybe not quite as, PR friendly. And unfortunately, fair or not, that goes a long way when you're kind of trying to keep your career going. And we've talked about, some of the bands that you're spotlighting this week and every other week on the Vault. It's, we talked about it just a couple weeks ago when we went to that concert. It's like, these are bands that are still doing great stuff, and for whatever reason, never got the chance to have the mainstream appeal for some of their later stuff that there's some of their other contemporaries or some other bands and other genres got to do. And it's not fair, but it's unfortunate reality of the music business.
Well, I think it's also unfortunate in that we're kind of past that era of listening to albums.
Yeah.
I think now you're just as likely to release a single. And to me, some of the bands I like from that era, it wasn't the song that was the big hit on MTV that I really enjoyed. It was some deeper cut on the album that just connected with me. And, I think you're just less likely to find that now.
Well, if you release the whole album now, AI is just going to scoop it all up and scan it all at once. So you got to leak that stuff out nice and slow. So that was kind of the other big story this week. I saw a post from Tara Mays on Facebook kind of referencing the big news about all the albums that were stolen by AI. And as we talked about off air, everybody made a big deal when everybody was on Napster and we wanted to sue a 10-year-old kid in his bedroom because he downloaded all these albums and sue him for millions of dollars to scare him to death. Well, how much could you sue the AI industry for if they're pirating all this music? We're talking trillions and trillions of dollars if we want to get right down to it, not even counting the derivative works that are being created off of all this music that was pirated.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing there. It's not even just that they're taking it and they're using it to learn. It's what they're producing after the learning that becomes the issue. I just, again, if we're going to be outraged at AI, let's make sure we're going after every avenue. Let's be angry about everyone. And going back to a topic we've talked about before, I think that's why it's so much more important for these bands that maybe aren't household names to reconsider using AI when making your videos.
Yep.
Because if my first visual impression of you is an AI video, I don't know you guys. That's just the reality of it. I don't know what's actually creating the music. You don't want to sound accusatory, but why, as the artist, would you put yourself in a situation where it's left up to doubt?
I mean, whether it's the video, whether it's the album art, I would rather see you draw stick figure album art than to create something that kind of looks AI-ish. Because, again, where do you draw the line? In your heart, you may be thinking, well, an AI album art, if that's all we're doing AI, that's justifiable. And that's not the debate we're going to have here. But for the person, like you said, who doesn't know this band and we're discovering them through the internet, and I see AI video or AI album art or, something along those lines, or even AI social media posts, like, I don't know that you didn't create the whole thing with AI. I don't know if AI didn't write all your songs. We've listened to some albums where I kind of had those suspicions, and it's like, that's concerning to me because I don't want to buy computer created music. I want to buy person created music because that's what I want to reward the people that have the talent and creativity to do this on their own. It's not impressive to have Claude come out and spit out a hair metal song. Like, yeah, I'm sure we could do it, but so what? Like, there's nothing in there. There's no soul to that.
Yeah, and again, even if the ethical part of it as a creator doesn't bother you, the optics should, because ultimately you want people to see your product and say, I want to support this. And if there are indications that it may not be on the up and up, you're potentially burning some customers. It's like you wouldn't just take off running out of the grocery store if you were in a hurry. Not that you're not in a hurry, but you don't want people in the grocery store to think you just shoplifted.
Yeah.
It's like, I returned my cart to the cart corral because I don't want people to think I'm a jerk.
Yeah.
Whether I'm a jerk or not.
Right. It's a perception. But
yeah.
But again, it comes back to the other point. Like, you as a band, and I know there are bands that listen to our podcast. You as a band might think, hey, we just got to use a little AI to get that breakthrough album, and then once we break in, like, then we'll be good. We won't use it then. Number one, once you create one with AI, you're gonna be like, well, we can't create without AI, so we got to keep doing it. Number two, once you create it with AI, if a record label signs you, they're going to figure out they don't need you because if you guys can create this with AI, we can create your sound with AI, and we'll just sign this contract that you don't even realize that you're signing over your digital rights, and all of a sudden we can just now create your band, and we don't need you. We don't have to pay you. We get to keep all the money. Like, again,
I just think from a marketing standpoint, you're better off doing everything you possibly can to prove, hey, we're humans creating art.
Yeah, that's to me, that's what everybody should want to support, and obviously, I think the outrage to AI is growing. I think it's growing across political lines, across social lines, across country lines. I think, like a lot of things, new technology at first is really cool, and everybody wants to try it out. And then as you try it out, you start getting into the ethical questions of it. You get into the moral questions of it. And then it's like, well, you know what? Maybe this wasn't such a great idea after all. Maybe, we tried it. It was cool. Like, I could make cool fake album art. That was great. But the reality of it is, I think people are kind of backpedaling now and saying, you know what, maybe this was a mistake.
Well, your hope is that you do start seeing the lines getting clearly drawn of what we're going to accept and what we're not. Because like anything else, I'm not going to suggest it's useless. It does have
Sure.
use and justifications for using it. It's just, let's make sure we know where we're using it, where we're not. Let's be transparent about it.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, interesting story for sure. One that's worth kind of keeping an eye on because, as I've said in the past, and we won't try to debate it every week, but it's a topic that's going to come up a lot, and I think it's going to continue to come up more. And when there's something newsworthy, we'll definitely talk about it. But yeah, that's kind of the newsy headlines. One other thing I want to remind everybody: of course, we're live on Twitch and we're live on YouTube. Just a reminder: in 2 weeks, we are moving back to Mondays, like the old Music Mondays when we first started out. Still be the Hard Rock Empire. Still be on Mondays. It will be on YouTube only. It'll be basically a tape podcast form for a few reasons. One, it gives us a little more flexibility to record at different times. Two, it allows us to kind of get it all polished. And three, most of our watches, views are basically coming on YouTube on our VOD. So really, that way we can just kind of make that a one-stop shop for people to stop by there. So that'll be coming up on July the 6th, Mike's birthday. Feel free to send him a birthday present on the debut of the first episode back on Monday. That'll be coming up 7 o'clock Eastern time on YouTube. Our address is on the screen, youtube.com/Nerdcast join us there. Otherwise, the show is going to be the same, and we'll still be dropping in live on Twitch from time to time. In fact, we'll be able to do that a little more regularly, a little less podcasty form, a little more free form. So look forward to that. That'll be coming up in July as well. So that is kind of all the newsy type stuff. It's time to get to the music, and As we mentioned, maybe not the strongest week in music. It wasn't terrible, but definitely have had better weeks in music. Nevertheless, Mike has created the playlist for the music of May the 29th. We're pasting that in the chat right now on both YouTube and Twitch. Go through there. There's some decent stuff in there. Definitely not the depth or quality that we've had some previous weeks where we've really had a lot of good stuff. But I don't want to make it sound like it was completely devoid of good music as well, because there was definitely some interesting stuff in there. Of course, Mike and I go through it, and we each pick one band to spotlight, but there are oftentimes other bands, re-releases, interesting names, things like that. I know one of the interesting names we're gonna talk about on the podcast, but overall, some interesting stuff in there. So, of the other stuff that didn't quite make the cut this week, Mike, what did you see that intrigued you?
Yeah, so kind of starting off with the major releases, we did have the newest from Devin Townsend, The Moth. What can you say about Devin Townsend, founder, strapping young lad, numerous projects under his name, just crazy, extreme, progressive guitar virtuoso, kind of crazy, but you're always going to find what he releases interesting.
To me, he's probably the most talented person who had a release this week. Like the
That
dude,
could be, yeah.
He's got just an incredible music sense. Like, whether you like what he's producing, I think your mileage may vary, because it is always, I don't even know if he knows where the box is. He's so far outside the box. Like, he lost the box many years ago.
Got to be a great place to be, where you can just create whatever you want.
Yeah, and he, unabashed, just here it is. Here's what I got. So it's worth giving it a listen, just because it is so out there. But incredibly talented guy. It's not always going to be music you're going to put on while you're doing your workout, but he's really talented.
Moving on, we have the album from Dogstar, All In Now. That being noteworthy because that is Keanu Reeves' band where he plays bass. It's not Wild Stallions, unfortunately. I think they were better, but it might be worth checking out.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you have something like that, it's at least worth a curiosity just to kind of see what it sounds like.
Exactly. A band that I feel like I need to check out more, because anytime I hear them on like satellite radio, I enjoy their music generally, but I've never really like delved into their catalog. Shinedown. They've released their 8th studio album titled 8. Florida-based hard rock band. Again, right now they feel like a greatest hits band to me, but I've never really sat and listened to any of their albums.
Yeah, that was one I kind of wanted to go back and give more of a listen to. Like, the track that was on the playlist sounded fine. Like, kind of sounded like them. So, depending on how you feel about them, I think that may be a good thing. But worth, I think, probably a listen to see kind of what they're up to now.
Moving on to, there weren't really any re-releases that caught my attention, but a couple of the other albums that I did enjoy this week that I'm not choosing. One of them, I don't even really know how to explain. It's this act called Decanon, and they released their newest album, Planet Decanon. It's the album's 30 tracks long. A lot of the tracks have Decanon in the name, and I feel lyrically they all kind of felt similar to me as I was going through this album while playing Dragon Quest Builders 2. It's the music's really good. I really enjoyed the music. It's just the concept behind it is just kind of out there.
Yeah, I was kind of bummed when you told me that, because that was one that I had high hopes for when I listened to the playlist track, and then you told me it was kind of weird and out there. And I'm like,
it's one I could see listening to again, just because it felt good having it on in the background while I was playing games.
Maybe that's what it was created for.
Perhaps. Let's see. Moving on, we had Eternal Evil with their newest album, Forever Feared. This being Swedish thrash metal band. Just straight up good thrash metal. Can't go wrong there. And finally, The Cruel Intentions released All Hail Hypocrisy. They are a Norwegian glam and sleaze rock band. Solid at that. Like, you want to set out to be a sleaze rock band? That album and their work is doing that.
Oh, that's good. It's never a bad thing to have more sleaze rock out
Yeah.
there. Of the stuff that I listened to, really there's only one other album that I was kind of on the fence about was Hypnosaur with Afterlife. First off, anytime your band has a guitar player, you're going to get my attention immediately. They were very prominent. It ended up maybe drifting away from what I was like solid pick range to like, this is all right. But overall, solid effort from those guys. If you're a fan of kind of a psychedelic type music with a guitar. Definitely worth checking that out.
Did it end up being kind of less synth rock? Because that was kind of what I thought it would be.
Yeah, it was a
on the
little
playlist.
little less than I was expecting. There were parts that I think were very synthy, but it wasn't quite as much as like I always dig a good synth rock.
Yeah.
Like, if you give me synth rock with AOR type vocals, there's a good chance I'm gonna pick it. But maybe it wasn't quite that. I think it leaned a little more to psychedelic in some tracks than it did to synth. So your mileage may vary there.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, overall, there's some stuff out there. Definitely worth checking out Mike's playlist. But in the end, there can only be two. Before we get to that, I did forget to post the link to the Discord. This is probably a good time to do that. Just a reminder to join the Discord. That is where we will post updates to the schedule. That's where we will have discussions about many topics. If you're in the Ohio Valley, we might be in there talking about tornadoes because we did do that the other night. Keep everybody updated on some nasty storms that were rolling through. Hopefully we do not have a repeat of that today. But, you never know what you're going to find in the Discord, but we will be in there. So join us in there. Join us in the Discord. Good time to do that with us, kind of changing some of the schedules and stuff. So a good time just to kind of keep tabs on what we've got. But with that said, it is time to get to the new music for this week, the two albums that did make the cut. And honestly, and I'm sure you're going to say the same thing, it really felt like there were two albums that really separated themselves from everything else, which in some regards made this task a lot easier because we didn't have a lot of them vying for those two spots. Mike, what have you got for us this week?
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. Not going into a week, this isn't where I thought I would end up, but this is where we are, and this album's actually really, really good. We were in Sweden talking about the 10th studio album from a Swedish Christian power metal band. These guys are Narnia, and the newest album, their 10th, is called X.
Yeah, sorry to ban some spam out of the chat real quick, but I got a chance to listen to this today. It was really good. Definitely encourage people to check it out. I overall was really impressed.
Yeah, so these guys formed back in 1996, disbanded in 2010, reformed 4 years later. Here we are today. They currently consist of Carl Johan Grimmark on guitars, bass, keyboards, and programming, Christian Revel Lilligren on vocals, Martin Herenstrom on keyboards, Jonathan Samuelson on bass, and Anders Kolorfors on drums. I was discovering a lot of new bands in the early 2000s, a lot of European metal bands. I never ran into these guys. I don't know if at the time the avenues that I had to get a hold of music, they just weren't serving these guys' albums. I don't really know, but I think the combination of flying the Christian flag as well as being a power metal band, you're kind of you've picked two areas where you're limiting audience reach, and that's unfortunate. But these guys have an amazing sound. Definitely one of the standout albums of the week. Apparently, and I kind of knew this just based on the name, apparently their music also references the Chronicles of Narnia, which I'm not really familiar with. So if there were references within this album, I wouldn't have known them. I mean, most of what I heard felt more biblical and not Narnia related, but
it's probably been 35 years since I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and whatever the book. I read the first two books of that Chronicles. I really enjoyed it, but
I think the second one was The Chamber of Secrets.
Yeah, that is incorrect.
Prisoner of Azkaban.
But
Twilight.
But yeah, what I read of that years and years and years ago, I really liked. But like I said, I don't think I would have caught any references. It's been far too long.
Yeah, no, but references caught or not, still just an amazing sounding album. Great vocals, great guitars. Metal Temple even gave it an 8 out of 10, highlighting the guitars, shared vocals, and production. They also mentioned that they were newcomers to the band, much like myself, and felt that the music was interesting enough to the uninitiated to keep you entertained and keep you engaged with it, and I definitely thought that was the case. Standout tracks on the album include Like a Thief in the Night, Ocean Wide, Heaven's Calling, Jerusalem, Every Breath, and the track that I picked to listen to, Remedy SOS.
Check these guys out. This is Narnia with their new album, X. This is the 6th track off of this album, Remedy SOS. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, overall, I thought this was really solid. I'm still a little bummed that Jerusalem was not a cover of Ed Guy's Jerusalem.
That would have been topical at least.
100%. This is a full circle episode. We just come right back around to Ed Guy, but which you should go find if you've not listened to that great song. But no, this was really good, and yeah, it's kind of both of these bands we're going to talk about are bands that have been around for a while and maybe have kind of for some reason stayed off your radar. Of course, they would stay off mine because I didn't get to stuff typically till you got to it. Since we've been doing this podcast, obviously it's a little different, but overall, really solid. They got a great sound, clearly polished. They've been doing this for a while, and overall, it was a really solid release. So nothing more to say. Like, it was really good. Definitely worth checking those guys out. Narnia, their new album out as of May the 29th. As I mentioned, it was really kind of a 2-album race this week, and both of us really jumped onto this next album pretty early in the process. This is the 6th album from the power metal band from Finland. This is Masquerage with Atomic Spies, maybe the winner for the name of the week for any of the bands. These guys originally started in 1998 as the Unchained, but eventually would become the Masquerage in 2000, so it wasn't too much later that took place. This is their 6th full-length album, but it is the first one in 8 years, so it's been a little while since they've released something. Apologies in advance to our fans from Finland because I'm going to try these names. Definitely some Finnish names. We have Kimmo Paramaki on guitars and vocals, Asi Raiski on bass, Mika Maunas on keyboards, and Marko Hakkanen on drums. The band was formed by cousins Paramaki and Hakkanen, and their Bandcamp describes their sound as blending elements of AOR, heavy metal, and power metal. One of the PR sites, and I always love looking these up to see, like, who are you comparing this band to for people who don't know. One of the PR sites described their sound as for fans of Halloween, Gamma Ray, Ed Guy, Sabotage, Pretty Maids, and Euro-Scandinavian melodic power metal in general. So that covers a lot of ground there.
Here's a bunch of bands, and then that general sound. If you like that general sound, then I didn't really need to mention all those bands.
Correct. Typically with bands that lean into the AR melodic and their power metal, vocals kind of soar above everything. And vocals are great, but Paramaki's guitar, I thought, really kind of stole the show on this album. To me, that was a big differentiator between this band and other power metal bands that have melodic vocals. Obviously, the keyboards are really prominent as well, which gave it a distinctive sound that really set it aside. Everything these guys did really kind of was on a different level than a lot of the other bands we talked about in past weeks as far as that power metal sound, and I think that's why these guys have put out this album that's so good. I think Paramaki's vocals having kind of a distinctive tone to it also allows this to stand out. It's not just your typical rent an AOR singer that has these very clean vocals that are like, and I don't want it to come across saying his vocals are bad. I just think there's a very distinctive nature to them, which in this case is really good. That's what really made this band stand out, is the little things that kind of separated them from just some run-of-the-mill power metal or AOR band we see every week. Overall, in a week that was thin on great choices, I thought this was really, really strong from front to back. Have to mention that according to Metal Archives, they made 3 compilation appearances. 2 of them were notable just for us. They did a song which was a Stormwitch cover, Rats in the Attic, on A Decade of Might and Magic 10th Anniversary Tribute back in 2018. And then they covered Gamma Ray's Send Me a Sign on Cosmic Rays, an underground tribute to Gamma Ray back in 2019. So clearly there's a Gamma Ray tie-in if you're interested. But overall, really like these guys. Really good album from them. Glad to see them back releasing music. Standout tracks, it was really good from front to back. If I had to pick 4, I would go The Devil to Pay, In the Vault, Waves, and the song we're going to listen to on the podcast is the title track, Atomic Spies. So let's check these guys out. This is Masquerage with Atomic Spies. This is the title track. It is track number 2 on the album. Let's listen to a little bit of that now.
No one's trying. Wipe away our souls. Time will tell us if we reached our goal. Secrets gone reveal everything.
You heard a little bit there at the end when I was talking about distinctive vocals. I really feel like he kind of got out of that comfortable AOR range and got into kind of like, I don't want to say screaming, but like screeching a little bit, kind of up against that wall. And again, I thought it made it stand out. It gave it more of an edge than a typical power metal AOR type sound. That's why I was like, this is, as soon as I listened to it, like, yeah, this is really, really good. And it would have been really good in any week, but this week it really stood out as being really, really strong. So definitely enjoyed these guys. I know you did as well. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought this was definitely the other really great album this week. And you kind of mentioned the vocals. It kind of felt a little bit like Rob Halford there at the end of that clip. When I was going through the music originally, you know, I'm kind of half paying attention, and this was the first one that really just caught my attention, where I'm like, wait, I got to pay attention to this. Like, everything else up to this point's been fine, but this actually deserves more listening. I did find on Discogs.com various artists, A Decade of Might and Magic, 10th Anniversary Tribute, released by Stormspell Records. It's a weird one. Like, the different things that are being covered, you got some group called Prince Emerald covering 5 King Diamond songs: Sleepless Night, Mansion in Darkness, Eye of the Witch, Amon Belongs to Them, Behind These Walls. You have a Gamma Ray cover there, and then undoubtedly somewhere else, right? We got Man of War being covered, Blind Guardian, Running Wild, another Blind Guardian. Yeah, it's just interesting.
I didn't even know that album existed.
No.
Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Heroes of Might and Magic, and game I still play the third version of that game religiously. Honestly, it's one of the few video games that I will sit and play almost nonstop. So,
well, and what I don't understand, because I assume Might and Magic must be in this case not the game. It's in reference to maybe this record company, because 10th Anniversary, the album came out in 2018.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense if that was the game. That's what drew my attention, is I thought it was something related to the game. But
yeah, the game is like from the 80s.
Yeah.
So.
I didn't know if it was like a later game or something that they were, because I know that like they had some Might and Magic games after. That's kind of disappointing that it wasn't related to the game, but still interesting these guys were on there. You know, again, that wasn't where they did the Gamma Ray cover. That was actually on the Gamma Ray tribute. But yeah, interesting that, you know, that seems like a random collection of songs either way.
Yeah, I don't know. That's really odd.
So interesting stuff though, and again, these guys were really talented, and glad to see them releasing music again. So definitely encourage you to check those guys out. One of the best albums of the week for sure. Before we get to the vault, it is time to take a quick break on Twitch. If you are watching on Twitch, we got to run 90 seconds of ads. They require that of us a couple times an hour. If you're on YouTube or if you're subscribed on Twitch, you won't get the ads. You'll hear us rambling a little bit, but you won't miss a thing. We'll come back with the vault, a couple of classic albums you'll want to check out, but we'll go ahead and get those ads out of the way so we can take it home with the vault coming up on the other side of this break, unless you are sticking with us on YouTube or you're subscribed, in which case you are still hearing us talk right now. We're watching the VOD, I guess, also an option. A reminder, next week we'll be back with another episode at our regular time, Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern. It is the music of June the 5th coming up next week. We're into the month of June, so join us for that. And again, a reminder, in 2 weeks, we will be back on Monday nights, July the 6th. That'll be the music of June the 12th. Again, format of the show isn't going to change. It's just going to be on Twitch. So if you're one of our few regular or on YouTube, if you're one of our few regular listeners on Twitch, and we do have a few, and we're very grateful for you, find us over on YouTube on Monday nights. That's where you'll be able to catch our program. If you're on YouTube already or you watch this VOD, then nothing's really going to change other than the fact it's going to come out on Mondays instead of Sundays. But we hope you'll join us for that. And again, we'll be live on Twitch still, but it'll be a little more random to some degree, and kind of a little more free-flowing than some of the stuff we're doing now. So look forward to all that. That's all coming up here soon. But yeah, hopefully we'll get a little stronger week in music next week. It is the beginning of the month. Sometimes that brings us some interesting releases. So hopefully June the 5th will be a little bit stronger than May the 29th was.
Yeah, I was looking online. Stormspell Records being the record label that released the Masquerage album, so I should have made that connection that is their record label.
Oh, okay, makes sense.
Let's see. I'm on their store, so I don't know if all these are their artists because they also have links to other record companies. But on their website, I mean, you got Dolman Gate, you got Agartha, Leatherhead, Steel Arctis, Triumpher. Bands that we've definitely talked about in the past. I don't know if they're all signed to Stormspell. I'd have to look into that more.
Yeah, I mean, another great record label, clearly releasing good music, and it seems like we're growing a pretty solid list of those type of labels that we see
Yeah.
on a regular basis, and it's always encouraging that there are more and more labels out there providing some level of support to bands that really need to be out there and need to get that kind of support.
Yeah, absolutely.
So always good stuff to see. Welcome back. If you were at the ads, we are back to take you home with the vault, where Mike and I will each give you a couple classic albums, or each give you one classic album to check out. Mike is continuing through a couple different gimmicks. The one he is on to today is coming back to the 90s and finding albums that were kind of released post grunge, whatever kind of marker you want to put down as far as when grunge really took over. Mike is going through and finding albums from bands that were not grunge, that were clearly from, the late 80s, early 90s, but have continued on now into the mid 90s in many cases, and kind of trying to see like what these albums sound like. Were they trying to keep their sound? Did they try to pivot? We've seen a little bit of both so far, which is interesting. Of course, a couple weeks ago, we talked about Bullet Boys, who we saw last week, and was really impressed with those guys. So excited to get to the letter C this week, and a band that we both really enjoy, and definitely curious to hear about this album. But what do you got for the vault this week?
Yeah, I felt like there weren't a lot of options under the letter C. Certainly not when looking at my CD collection. But obviously, one band that was certainly huge in that era that seemed to be the clear choice to me was Cinderella. One thing I thought was kind of interesting about them is that it doesn't really fit kind of the trend I expected to find with bands like this. As far as kind of did they adjust their sound after 1991. But we're talking about their last album, actually. Their fourth and final album came out in 1994, Still Climbing. Classic lineup for these guys: Tom Kiefer on lead vocals, keyboard, saxophone, harmonica, steel guitar, mandolin, dobro. Eric Brittingham on bass and backing vocals, Jeff LaBar on guitar, backing vocals, and slide guitar. Sadly, he passed away in 2021. And Fred Corey on drums, percussion, and backing vocals. After 1991, Corey was replaced by Kenny Aronoff, so he was the one who's on drums on this album. Obviously, these guys were huge in the 80s rock scene. Their debut Night Songs had obviously the title track, Shake Me, Nobody's Fool, Somebody Save Me, Push Push. Nobody's Fool obviously being a huge power ballad, and I have to wonder if it, along with another song, might have been part of the reason why they kind of met the fate they did. The follow-up, 1988, Long Cold Winter, more hits, but most importantly, probably Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone. Also Gypsy Road, Last Mile, Coming Home. I just, like I mentioned, I got to wonder if it wasn't the multiple power ballad hits that kind of hurt these guys in the future, because according to Wikipedia, and kind of just based on your own knowledge of their songs that were big, even by their second album in 1988, they had already shifted into more of blues rock and less just glam metal, whatever you want to call it at that point in time. Album number 3 in 1990, Heartbreak Station, even further into blues. After that, in 1991, Tom Kiefer actually lost his voice and required some surgeries to get it back up and running again, which is what led to Still Climbing being delayed until 1994. The album did feature the track Hot and Bothered, which also appeared on the soundtrack to Wayne's World back in 1992. So I kind of wonder if anything would have been different had the album come out in 1992 at the same time. It's hard to say. Wikipedia recounts a story told by bassist Eric Brittingham in a 1995 interview where he talks about obstacles they faced in promoting the album when it came out. He was told basically by their marketing people that MTV told them that they stopped playing our style of music, so we don't want anything to do with you guys. Low sales on the album also led to the temporary disbanding before they got back together and kind of did the touring scene for quite a few years. Unfortunately, they did ultimately retire. And the way it sounds, Tom Kiefer doesn't really have any intention of bringing Cinderella back. it's kind of weird because of all those bands that I kind of saw in the early 2000s when I thought, hey, these guys are still out there doing it. They were one of the few that never released another album. They never had anything to promote, really. They were just out there playing. It's just weird because this band clearly early on decided, hey, we're going to lean into our influences, really kind of do the blues rock thing. And, with that in mind, they weren't the same as what people consider to be hair metal necessarily. So it's a shame that despite that, by 1994, it's still, hey, we want nothing to do with you guys. To me, it's kind of reminiscent of like Saigon Kick, who had the one really big power ballad, but they weren't a hair metal band, so to speak. But at the end of the day, it didn't really matter. As far as this album goes, if you like heavily blues-influenced hard rock, it's an enjoyable album. The standout tracks include Bad Attitude Shuffle, All Comes Down, Hard to Find the Words, Through the Rain, Easy Come, Easy Go, Not That Easy Come, Easy Go, or That Easy Come, Easy Go, and Hot and Bothered. But yeah, this is a band that kind of found where it was going and still got swept up in that tsunami.
Yeah, like you said, I don't think there's any question their two biggest hits being power ballads hurt them. Like, it feels like some of those other bands had their power ballad or two, but they also had some other song that hit that kind of gave them that thing to go back to. They were like, hey, we're not just a power ballad band. We do have rock chops. I do wonder, because I'm a huge fan of blues influence rock. I think that's, I love horn rock. I love, funky rock, a lot of bands like that of this era that I gravitated towards maybe more so just because I've always kind of really enjoyed that. I don't know if, because you think of someone, because immediately when you talked about them being very blues influenced, like, I wonder, because we saw like Darius Rucker basically go the country route after his rock career. I don't want to say ended, but like clearly ran into a wall where the Hootie and the Blowfish sound wasn't being promoted anymore. You just wonder if they had considered either moving a little more country or moving bluesy or something, if they could have found support for that. But again, I think that's where the stigma of hair metal hurt a lot of these bands because they didn't see the talent. They just saw the hair. And it's like, these guys I think could have gone on to do a lot of blues rock that would have been really popular, but didn't have any kind of institutional support to it, so they end up just fading away. And you're right. I do wonder if the song, with Wayne's World, if they had released an album then, with Wayne's World being just insanely popular, if they could have rode those coattails to maybe keep things going. And I'm sure it's a what if that they have to kind of replay as well. And again, nothing they could do about it, but again, another really talented band that gets pigeonholed into a genre that kind of downplayed the talent of a lot of these bands.
Wayne's World is kind of a good subject when talking about things like this because obviously I love both Wayne's World movies, but was there a greater indication of who the industry was like, hey, you're okay no matter what you do, than the artist who appeared in those movies?
Yeah.
Alice Cooper and Aerosmith.
Yeah.
Like, those just seem to be like, because I mean, listening to this album, I thought there's a little bit of Aerosmith here.
Yeah.
Like, if you like Tom Kiefer's voice, which has kind of its own category with like your Brian Johnsons and Udo Dirkschneider.
Very unique sound.
Yeah. Like, otherwise, you got the horns in some of the songs. You got, like, it kind of felt like mid-90s Aerosmith.
Yeah. And that worked out really well. And who knows, again, if they're able to tour and this song hits and maybe they get onto a tour with Aerosmith in the mid-90s when they're kind of having that resurgence with their music. Who knows? It could turn out different to them. But, yeah, it is interesting looking back. Like, a lot of those bands that were involved in those movies were very, very mainstream, very safe, despite being portrayed as these metal guys, rock guys.
And artists who already had kind of their time and had since kind of reinvented themselves. I mean, obviously at that point, Alice Cooper was kind of on the tail end of his hair metal run, and Aerosmith had probably just released Permanent Vacation, Pump. I Don't Get a Grip hadn't come out yet, or might have right around Wayne's World 2, but still it was like that reinvention that everyone embraced. And you have a band like Cinderella who were just it wasn't even prompted. It's like by 1988 they were already shifting their sound preemptively,
Yeah.
and it didn't help them.
Yeah. It's again, it's the sad thing about going through some of these is just there are bands that for whatever reason didn't work out, and you don't know why because the talent was there,
Yeah.
and at one point they had label support, but then it disappeared. Like it's just a shame, and because of that, I think the newer generations probably won't go back and listen to their albums. They'll hear the greatest hits and they'll hear the ballads and kind of categorize these guys. And, they were a lot more than that, as so many of those bands were. And hopefully people will go back and listen and really embrace that.
It just makes you wonder because I think we're always kind of hyper focused on kind of what happened to these pop metal bands. Was the same thing did the same thing happen previously to like disco acts? I mean, was that kind of another case of the industry saying, yeah, we're done with you?
I think it probably was even harsher to some degree because that went from super popular to almost disdain. Like, obviously you think of Disco Demolition Night with the White Sox. They didn't have a hair metal demolition night. Like,
which is insane when you consider it's just music.
Yeah. And it's like people hated the disco.
I'll be
there.
honest, I like Kiss's disco song.
Yeah.
It's a good song.
There's some catchy music that was disco. Like
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of this genre in general, but there's some good stuff in there. And
I don't like anything being just outrightly dismissed.
yeah. And I feel like that was, like I said, almost a front, I think, to that movement to some degree. And I think the window of it was a lot shorter as well.
It felt like a test run to see if the music labels could actually dictate what was tasteful.
Yeah. And it turns out, I guess even back then there was some pushback, and as it turned out, it didn't really work out that way. But yeah, Cinderella's great. Definitely worth checking those guys out. Go back to listen to their albums because just incredibly talented band that unfortunately doesn't get the credit they deserve. As far as my vault pick this week, I am continuing on through one-hit wonders. We are up to 1975 this week. And I was excited when I saw the list of one-hit wonders this week just because this band features, I think, maybe one of the best classic rock vocalists of all time. Certainly someone who's, I think, underrated somehow despite a lot of the great stuff he's done. The album we're going to talk about this week is the debut album by the pop rock band Ace. The album released in 1974. The single that we're going to talk about released in 1975. This is Five Aside is the album. Of course, the song in question is How Long. That is the big hit. But we'll talk about the album first. The album charted on the Billboard 200, reaching number 11 in 1974. The single How Long reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the spring of 1975, number 24 on the Adult Contemporary chart, number 3 on the Canadian Singles chart, number 20 on the UK Singles chart. But unfortunately, there was nothing else on this album that really charted, which is a shame because this is a really good album. It's not a very long album, but it's a really good album. The band at the time was made up of Paul Carrack, who, again, I think is one of the all-time best classic rock vocalists, but he's also on organ, piano, and electric piano. Phil Harris on lead guitar and vocals. Alan Bam King on rhythm guitar and vocals. Tex Comer on bass, and Fran Byrne on drums and percussion. The band formed in 1972 in Sheffield as Ace Flash and the Dynamos, but soon shortened their name to Ace. The band had kind of assembled their members from a bunch of other bands. They kind of made it on the pub circuit before they really kind of made it big. They eventually decided to move to the United States after the success of How Long to try to kind of play off of that. They released 3 total albums. The final one was in 1977. It just, for whatever reason, they just never really found that next hit song that kind of allowed them to continue. And the band disbanded in July of 1977. But I think it all comes back to Paul Carrack. The BBC dubbed him the man with the golden voice. Record Collector remarked, if vocal talent equaled financial success, Paul Carrack would be a bigger name than legends such as Phil Collins or Elton John. Pretty high praise there. Obviously, he was involved in a lot of other stuff, including bands like Squeeze. Would later on be the co-lead vocalist for Mike and the Mechanics, along with Paul Young. Sadly, Young passed away in 2000. That kind of ended Mike and the Mechanics' run. It was just a lot of hit songs. We mentioned How Long, Squeeze is Tempted, which is another classic song, 1981, Mike and the Mechanics' Silent Running, The Living Years, Over My Shoulder. He, of course, had a solo hit, Don't Shed a Tear, back in 1988. He's also recorded with artists such as Linda Ronstadt, the Eagles, Diana Ross, Tom Jones, Michael McDonald. He actually played the organ on Elton John's The Way You Look Tonight, which was the B-side to Candle in the Wind. So, like, this guy, just incredibly talented musician who, again, as good as he is, I think doesn't get the credit he deserves. Overall, this album was really solid. Some of it was kind of mainstream, kind of like the song How Long. Some of it was very classic rock feeling, would have absolutely been in place. But there was a little bit of funky rock here, too. Some of the tracks kind of reminded me of a band like Mungo Jerry, who, of course, did In the Summertime, had a little bit of funk to it. But overall, it was good. It's quick, less than 40 minutes for the whole album. But definitely worth a listen to hear some of the formative work of Paul Carrack. But overall, it was really solid. I think probably the best one of these type of albums I've listened to so far since I've done this gimmick. Standout tracks include Sniffin' About, How Long, Time Ain't Long, and Satellite. Overall, like I said, worth it just to hear Paul Carrack getting started, a guy who's just insanely talented and a guy that a lot of people probably don't know by name because his biggest songs came with bands that people might not have even realized he was in.
Yeah, his work with Mike and the Mechanics alone is tremendous, and he is neither Mike nor a mechanic. But yeah, Don't Shed a Tear, great solo track. I mean, that's one that I feel like should be a bigger deal than it even is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not surprised that this is quality.
Yeah, really, really good stuff. Classic rock. It's just, again, really quick, really enjoyable, definitely worth checking out. In 2 weeks, we're going to get to what I think is probably the first band that when you mention the band, you're like, there's no way this band is a one-hit wonder. Really kind of surprising. But we'll be talking about the boys being back in town in 2 weeks with Thin Lizzy. A little surprising that they're a one-hit wonder, but just an incredibly talented band. So I'm really interested to hear how that album sounds because they've got several really good songs, but unfortunately for them, only the one. The boys
Shocking.
are back in town and made the charts here in the U.S. So, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes in a couple weeks, and I'll be diving back into Journey coming up next week as we really start getting the lead up to their big commercial hit albums coming up starting next week. But for now, that is going to wrap up this edition of the Hard Rock Empire. Thank you so much for joining us again next week. Regular time, Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern, the music of June the 5th. In 2 weeks, we'll be moving to Mondays on YouTube. July the 6th, 7 o'clock Eastern time. We'll be there. Hopefully you'll be there with us. Of course, you'll be able to catch us on the VOD on YouTube, just like always. No change there, except the episodes will come out on Monday instead of Sunday. So please join us for that. Big thanks to Chris for joining us in the chat tonight. Big thanks to Mike, as always, for his hard work on this podcast. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support. And a big thanks to you for listening whenever and wherever. One more Sunday night. We'll be with you next Sunday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time. Join us then. And until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Hard Rock Empire.